Thank you for coming and welcome to the center. I'm Carolyn Merrick. I'm a program coordinator here, and it is my pleasure to introduce this wonderful event to you. Is there anyone here who's here for the first time? Oh, nice. Welcome. Great. Of those folks, all right, if there's anyone who's interested in a tour of the center after this, there will be a few of us who are more than happy to take you around, show you around, and answer any questions that you have. So if you'd like to do that, towards the end of the presentation, if you just want to mingle by the back door, and we'll come find you, okay? All right, and also, if you're interested, the Rivanna Winds Dixieland Band is performing here, right here at 7 o'clock. They do ragtime, gospel, blues, waltzes, and more. So you're more than welcome to stay for that if you'd like. Special thanks goes to two of our members, Virginia Porter and Janie Marcinowski. Let's get them. If it weren't for them, we wouldn't be here. They put together wonderful cultural events for us to have here at the center. We're very grateful for their support of the center and all they do here, as well as being volunteers here. Also, just a special thanks to Enid Krieger, who you will see. Enid's another one of our wonderful members, and I think half of the people here know Enid, at least. And she has created, produced, and she actually stars in tonight's event. If you have any interest, like I said, or you want to learn more about the center, there's a table right outside the center with some information. And again, I'll be here, and so will other people, to give you any information you like. So, all right, sit back and enjoy, and we'll get started.
Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. And before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go
Good evening. Welcome. The Center at Belvedere has embarked on an initiative to address systemic racism in our community, and here at the center, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee recognizes that one of the ways to address it is by education, by learning about the past, and by reckoning with the idea that if we look at all people as just people, rather than by the color of their skin, or where they were born, or their sexual identity, or any of the characteristics we use to divide people, we will find that we're surrounded by exceptional people of all races, colors, cultures. Many of those people participated in the presentations we hosted via our speaker series. In our presentation this evening, we are honoring not only an exceptional person from the annals of history, but also the ordinary, extraordinary Black people that we encounter every day, right here in Charlottesville. Leading our nonprofits, standing in front of a classroom, caring for the sick, and participating in activities here at the center, faith, hope, and love are the virtues that sustain so many of these people around us. And it's faith, hope, and love that sustained those living in bondage so many years ago. This evening, we will experience those virtues by lifting up the name and values of an amazing woman named Sojourner Truth. Sojourner Truth was an illiterate former slave who transformed herself into a vastly powerful orator, a committed abolitionist, an activist for women and poor people, a preacher, the inspiration for Black enslaved people, and a model for women and men everywhere. She will be portrayed by one of those ordinary, extraordinary Black people that we encounter every day.
One way not to talk. Knock yourself out. Born Isabella Bonfrey, Sojourner Truth was the second youngest child of 10, born in 1797 to James and Elizabeth Bonfrey, who were slaves on a farm in Hurley, Ulster County, New York. The family was owned by Colonel Hardenberg, who belonged himself to a class of people called Low Dutch. Isabel's mother, known as Mama Beck, had some 10 or maybe 12 children, Sojourner being the youngest, but most of them were sold away. Sojourner only had the privilege of knowing 6 of her siblings. Isabella's father was a very tall and straight man who gave him the name of Bonfrey, a Low Dutch word for tree. Isabella herself was very tall and gaunt with a very commanding presence. Because her original owners were Dutch, Isabella spoke that language before she spoke English, and never succeeded in losing her Dutch accent. She had been taught by her parents to believe deeply in God and to speak to Him whenever she really needed help. As she grew up and suffered many atrocities of slavery, it was her faith, her strong belief in God, that helped her to survive. After the death of her parents at age 9, she was auctioned off for $100 to John Neely, again of Ulster County, New York. Mr. Neely understood Dutch, but his wife didn't, and this became a source of many a beating for the young Isabella, as she had a difficult time understanding the instructions Mrs. Neely gave her. Once, because she didn't understand the instructions, Mr. Neely took her to the barn, tied her hands, and gave her the most cruel whipping she had ever received, one that caused her flesh to be deeply lacerated and from which it was believed she might die. By then she was only 12 years old. But remembering her parents' teachings, she prayed and prayed to God for help. And after several months, she was sold again, this time for $105 to a fisherman named Krieger. After living with the Kriegers for a year and a half, at age 13, she was sold again for 70 pounds to John Dumont of New Paltz, New York. She lived there and worked there for 17 years. The Dumonts treated Isabel humanely, meaning that they didn't beat her as often as the other folks. And over time, she even met a nice young man, another slave, named Robert, who lived nearby. Isabella and Robert were very much in love, but Robert's owner would not permit him to marry her. At some point, Robert sneaked away to visit her, but sadly, he was caught, badly beaten, and Sojourner never saw him again. Shortly thereafter, her master, Mr. Dumont, forced her to marry one of his slaves, Thomas, with whom she had several children. Most of them, as I said, were sold away. John Dumont had always promised Isabella that he would free her and that he would uphold the New York State anti-slavery law, but he didn't keep his promise. And so Isabella, tired of the beatings and the mistreatment she endured for most of her life, gathered up some food, few items of clothing, and her baby daughter, and walked away from the Dumonts, leaving a 5-year-old son, Peter, behind. Isabella walked about 5 miles to the home of Quaker abolitionists Isaac and Maria von Wagner, who purchased her and her daughter's freedom in 1827, saving her from what might have been the ultimate punishment. She assumed their name and became Isabella Wagner and remained with the family for just 1 year. To retaliate, John Dumont illegally sold her son Peter to a plantation in Alabama. Isabella had never been to the Deep South, but was told that the cruel punishment of slaves in that area was far worse than any she had ever endured in the North, and she vowed to get her son back. A few years later, in 1843, Isabella had an experience that solidified her faith and belief in God. According to her dictated biography, God revealed himself to her, and with all the suddenness of a flash of lightning, showing her in the twinkling of an eye that he was all over, that he pervaded the universe, and that there was no place where God was not. So, wanting to make a fresh start, Isabella asked God for a new name, and again she had vision. God renamed her Sojourner because she was to travel up and down around the land, showing people their sins and being a sign for them. She was to declare the truth to people, hence her second name, Truth.
For the next 30 years, Sojourner followed God's instructions, preaching and speaking out against slavery. She traveled throughout New England, attending prayer meetings and other meetings that she called. After being physically assaulted by one particularly vicious mob, she was forced to walk with a cane for the rest of her life. In 1850, Sojourner Truth was among the first activists to make the connection between the rights of slaves, Black people, and the rights of women, and she launched a crusade of anti-slavery feminism. She was a powerful speaker on both subjects. She constantly reminded her allies that Black women were half the slave population, and that without changing the condition of all women's oppression, Black women would never achieve freedom. In fact, although she was befriended by women like Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who fought for women's rights, they were only fighting for white women's rights. So naturally, she disagreed with them on many issues, because as a Black woman, she faced burdens that they, as white women, didn't have. She had to deal with the increasingly racist and disrespectful language of the women's groups. And she had to deal with the challenge of combating a suffrage movement that didn't want to be linked to anti-slavery causes because they felt it would hurt their cause. So though she remained supportive of women's suffrage, Sojourner distanced herself from names like Anthony and Stanton because the rights of Black women were never considered by them. So now, I'd like each of you to close your eyes and imagine it's the year 1851. There's a women's rights convention being held in Akron, Ohio, and you're all there. We must remember that at that time, very few women would dare to speak out at a meeting, and only those present could really appreciate the power and the whole soul gesture of what was about to take place. So you're there. The convention hall is filled with mostly white women. And suddenly,
What? What? To my ears to say men. Women's rights? The vote, ladies, who is it that sits you down from the carriage in the rain, gets you across the mud puddles? What, ladies? Get yourselves out of this meeting now. Go home to your husband.
You joke! This is a blasphemy! This is deplorable! What rights do you think women have? The good book! The good book! Paul tells us, but I not permit not a woman to teach, nor to have dominion over men, but to be in quietness.
Why do you want to learn? Don't you have enough work already? Cooking our food and raising our kids? Heck, I tell you, the book says on the page 1, God made man first. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to their husbands in everything. I said everything. That's right. That's right. It's right.
Tell him.
Come on, women. You know what
The good book.
the good book says. Submit
This
to
is
the
the thought.
Ladies, if you got any sense, you put out the place for us all be right now.
Children, with all this racket, there must be something out of kilter. Seems to me that twixt the women of the North and the Negroes of the South, all asking about rights. The white man gonna be in a fix pretty soon. Well, what's all this here talking about? That man over there says that women should be helped into carriages and lifted over ditches and have the best place everywhere. Nobody ever helped me into no carriage. Lifted me over no mud puddle or gave me the best place. And ain't I a woman? Look at me. Look at my arm. I have plowed and planted and gathered into barns, and no man could head me. Ain't I a woman? I could work as hard and eat as much as a man when I could get it, and bear the lashes well. Ain't I a woman? I have born 13 children, seen most of them sold off into slavery. And when I cried out with my mother's grief, none but Jesus heard me. And ain't I a woman? And what's this thing in the head? What's this? The internet. Thank you, honey. Internet. What's that got to do with women's rights and Negroes' rights? If my cup holds but a pint and yours holds a quart, wouldn't you be mean not to give me my little half measure full? That man in black over there, he says that women can't have the same rights as men because Christ wasn't a woman. Where'd your Christ come from? Where'd your Christ come from? From God and a woman. Man ain't had nothing to do with him. You know, if the first woman that God ever made was strong enough to turn the world upside down all alone, then these women all together should be able to take it and turn it right side up again, and the men ought to love. Now, let me share some things with y'all. Old Sojourner is old, so some of the things she has to read. So you know, friends, I've had a very, very hard life. I couldn't read or write, but the children used to read the Bible to me. And that's how I knew how the world should work and how it can be changed. I experienced firsthand the family breakups and the arbitrary cruelty of a system that defined human beings as chattel. But I had a rebellious spirit, lots of courage and determination, and I was able to surmount all of those obstacles and walk away from slavery at age 29. Now, I want you to know that my struggle to define myself as a person, a woman of color, and a citizen didn't begin or end with that speech you just heard at Akron, Ohio. I knew Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton very well. In fact, you know, we were all from New York, and we were kind of friends. But Miss Anthony helped to organize a meeting in Seneca Falls in 1848 to talk about the issue of voting rights, and she made sure not to include me. She was hell-bent on not having black people get the right to vote alongside white people. As a matter of fact, at that meeting, she said that she would cut off her right arm before she'd ever work or demand the ballot for the Negro first before the woman. But you know, she and her group did good work. Their work led to the passing of the 15th Amendment in 1870. That 15th Amendment was supposed to allow black men to vote after the Civil War. But it was written there. It said that all people would be allowed to vote regardless of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. But the states, especially the southern states, they did everything they could, all kinds of discriminatory tricks to keep black citizens and to keep women from voting. In fact, the white men were so determined to keep women from voting that when Miss Anthony went to vote in the 1872 presidential election, they had her arrested. All they did to me when I went to get the ballot was just turn me away. I was up in Michigan, and they just turned me away. They wouldn't even give me a ballot. But you know, our arguments were just so different. You see, white women were fighting because they wanted the same decision-making power that their husbands had. While black women, like me and Harriet Tubman and Ida B. Wells, we saw the vote as a means to improving our conditions. But children, this whole voting rights issue could take half the night for me to talk about, so I'm just going to tell you a little bit more about me. If you're worried about my son Peter, I got him back. That same year I walked away in 1829, the Quakers helped me. The Quakers up in Ulster County. They helped me petition the court, and I went before the grand jury, and within that same year I got my son back, and then we moved to New York. In 1850, I dictated my biography to my friend, Olive Gilbert, and William Lloyd Garrison was kind enough to print it in his newspaper, The Liberator. Oh yes, I worked really hard. I worked real hard. I even worked hard during the Civil War. I encouraged black men to join the Army, the Union Army. I got supplies for the troops. I took care of the soldiers on the field. And in 1864, because of all my hard work, I got to meet President Abraham Lincoln. Oh yes, I stayed very, very busy. I helped freed slaves find jobs. I petitioned the government to get land for freed blacks. I spoke on behalf of prison reform, and I made countless speeches on behalf of black Americans. Oh yes, I've had quite a life. They even put a bust of me in the United States Capitol, the first sculpture to honor an African American woman. And they have museums and statues and all kinds of memorials to me all around the United States. I even heard that I was written up in a Smithsonian magazine. I'm listed as one of the 100 most significant Americans of all time. Imagine that. And even today, our work's not done. Take a look at this.
The vote is the most powerful, non-violent tool we have in a democratic society. We must not allow the power of the vote to be neutralized. We must never go back. 1, 2, 3, 4. Don't be right for white people. 5, 6, 7, 8. We cannot afford to wait. Unconditional and universal enfranchisement of the black man in every state in the Union. Without it, his liberty is a mockery.
Wouldn't it be more absurd than to have one group of human beings who are denied rights working to prevent another group from obtaining those same rights?
necessary to say no to racial injustice. This must be followed by a positive program of action. The struggle for the right to vote, for economic uplift of the people.
1807, the 15th Amendment gave every man a chance to vote. And now it's 64, and they still trying to keep us away from the ballot. You say, honey, I'm behind you. Well, move, I don't want you back there. I want you to say, honey, I'm with you, and we'll go up this freedom road together.
It was more than 100 years ago, Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. A century has passed since equality was promised, and the Negro is not yet equal. The time for justice has now come. No force can hold it back.
The sad irony of the court's decision today lies in its utter failure to grasp why the Voting Rights Act has proven effective. Throwing out pre-clearance when it has worked to stop discriminatory changes is like throwing away your umbrella in a rainstorm.
Well, friends, I'm gone now. I retired to Battle Creek, Michigan, and I died in 1883. I thank you all for being here this evening. I thank you all for honoring my memory. And I hope each of you will keep up the fight for freedom and for human rights in our country. Obliged to you for hearing me. And now, old Sojourner ain't got nothing more to say.
Thank you all so much for coming out and enjoying seeing this young lady portraying Sojourner Truth. This is on behalf of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee for your debut here at the Center. We'd like to give you some.
Thank you.
translation. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.